I can't stop thinking about how to move on from this messy situation. I'm a 25-year-old dude, and my ex-fiancée and I were together for 6 long years. I proposed to her during the pandemic, but little did I know that she was actually having an affair at the time she said yes. It just doesn't make sense to me. Why on earth would anyone do that? How could she accept my proposal while hooking up with someone else on the side? It's just baffling to me. I've always been a bit of an awkward guy, especially when it comes to ladies. But when I met my fiancée, let's call her Monica, I was smitten in no time. I had never experienced love like this before, but I just knew she was the one I wanted to spend the rest of my life with from the moment I met her. What's crazy is that she seemed to like me too, and we were already talking about moving in together and having kids by the end of our first week together. It was all happening so fast. The time leading up to the big day was amazing for me, but looking back, it probably wasn't the same for Monica. One day, I caught a glimpse of a message on my fiancé's phone that made me stop in my tracks. I couldn't shake the feeling, so that night while she was sleeping, I got up and went through her phone. I'm actually pretty tech-savvy, and I even make a living from some of the mobile apps I've created. While I'm not super rich, I'm financially stable enough to take a year off without any long-term consequences. Anyway, I didn't find anything that was completely conclusive, but I did come across a lot of suspicious things, like deleted messages and a Snapchat contact with a lot of interaction. There were even some pictures of a guy I didn't recognize, so I decided to install spyware on her phone. I did a quick Google search and picked the most expensive service available, which even allowed me to remotely access the camera and microphone. The next day, Monica was supposed to leave for a 5-day business trip. Since she worked in sales, it wasn't necessarily unusual for her to be away for extended periods of time. The moment my fiancé walked out the door, the messages between her and the other guy started flooding in. I was completely crushed and ended up vomiting several times because I just couldn't believe what I was reading. For a while, I refused to accept the truth and became obsessed with finding out more information. I scoured through everything I could get my hands on and discovered that their affair had started over 2 months before I even proposed to her. To make matters worse, her affair partner was a married man who was 10 years older than her and had 3 kids. His wife was even 7 months pregnant at the time. The final straw was when I could hear them in action while they were in a hotel room together. They were professing their love for each other, trashing me and his wife, and even talking about running away and starting a new family. It completely tore me apart. I had no idea what to do and didn't have the courage to call and confront her about it. In the end, I turned to my childhood best friend. Let's call him Andre. Andre grew up in a Brazilian favela and was tough as nails. He and his mother moved in next door when I was 12, and we've been close ever since. This was in the UK, by the way. Andre's father had passed away a few years prior, and although he never talked about it, his mother said he died in a random act of violence. My mother had left us when I was 10 due to her pill addiction, and my father never remarried. When Andre and I first met, he didn't speak a word of English. However, we quickly became close friends that summer and managed to learn each other's languages. I think our bond was formed through shared experiences of trauma. Since then, Andre and I have been inseparable, which is kind of strange, since I'm an awkward and conflict-averse nerd, while Andre is extremely popular and fearless. He's not particularly big or muscular, but he's tough as nails. Everyone loves Andre. In fact, someone threw him a surprise party in high school, and 250 people showed up. Meanwhile, I can probably count my friends on one hand, and even then, most of them are just acquaintances. I confided in Andre about everything that had happened with my fiancée. I showed him the messages and emails that I had uncovered, and he was silent for a long time. Finally, he told me that he couldn't give me any specific advice because this was something I had to deal with on my own. I had to handle the situation in a way that felt right to me. But then, he reminded me about a girl who had cheated on him in the past. Andre went absolutely nuclear on her, exposing her to their family and friends and going completely no contact. After Andre's suggestion, I still didn't know what to do, but it was the only plan I had, so I told him that's what I wanted to do with Monica. Over the next few days, we packed up all of Monica's belongings, drove them to a storage unit, changed the locks on my apartment, and prepared to pick her up from the airport. Thankfully, Andre was driving because my hands were shaking so badly that I had to sit on them to hide it. Monica got into the car, all happy and laughing, but instantly noticed that something was off with me. I just told her I wasn't feeling well. Andre smiled and told her that I had a cool surprise planned for her at her parents' house. I didn't say a word the entire trip. I tried to hide my face and fake a smile as best I could. The rest of the day felt like it was moving in slow motion from the moment Monica got into the car. I had already talked to her parents the day before and told them we were coming over with a surprise announcement. When we arrived, there were hugs and smiles, and I almost backed out at that point. I love her parents, and they've always been so kind to me and made me feel welcome. Soon, Monica was sitting on the sofa between her parents. At some point, someone asked about the big surprise, and Andre urged me to go ahead with it. I started by expressing to Monica's parents how much I appreciated them, and how grateful I was that they had accepted me into their family with such warmth. But then, I started to choke up. I had this whole speech planned out, one that was eloquent and well composed. However, I completely forgot my words, and so I just blurted out the truth. Monica has been cheating on me with a coworker who has kids and whose wife is 7 months pregnant. The engagement is off, the wedding is off, and our relationship is over. Monica, your things are in a storage unit. Without saying another word, I dropped the key to the storage unit on the floor and declared, "This is goodbye forever." Then I walked out of the room while everyone was left sitting there in stunned silence. As I left, I could hear Andre telling Monica's family that I needed time to heal and asking them not to contact me unless it was absolutely necessary. Once we were in the car, Andre suggested that I post something on the Facebook group we had created for planning the wedding. It was a group that included my entire family, her entire family, and all of our friends. So I posted a brief message that was almost identical to what I had told her parents, and then I disconnected from the group. Andre kept telling me how proud he was of me and how someday I'd look back on this moment and be glad that I stood up for myself. But to be honest, I was just stunned. None of this felt good or real. Our next planned stop was to go to the AP's wife's house. When she answered the door, I blurted everything out without even introducing myself. I think she even slapped me at one point. As I gave her a thumb drive with all of the evidence on it, her husband appeared from around the corner. His wife immediately started screaming at him, telling him to leave and not come near her. He tried making excuses, but as soon as he took a step forward, Andre was right up in his face, saying, "You heard the lady? Get out!" After some more arguing, he eventually packed a bag and left. Andre stayed and talked to the wife for a while, but I was just trying to process everything that had happened in my screwed-up life. In the end, the wife invited us inside, and Andre called his mother. We ended up staying there for the night until Monica's father could come and pick her up the next morning. She was too scared that her husband might come back and didn't want to be alone. Inside, I felt completely invisible. Nobody seemed to see me or even notice that I was there. I just sat there, silently crying to myself. I knew that Monica was in a much worse situation than me, with her being married and having kids, but it still hurt me deeply that nobody even bothered to look at me. Eventually, everyone fell asleep, but I was still wide awake and crying. In that moment, I decided that I couldn't take it anymore and that I was going to end my life. I started searching for pills, but I couldn't find any, so I grabbed a long tool and planned to just push it through my heart. I held the tool towards my chest with both hands, and as I took a deep breath, the tool went under my rib cage and penetrated about a centimeter. I have no idea how long I stood there, but eventually, I left the tool on the table and went back to my chair, where I spent the rest of the night crying. I just couldn't wrap my head around what was happening to me. Monica's father arrived at 5:30 in the morning, and I opened the door to let him in. Despite my disheveled appearance, he remained surprisingly calm and asked me how I was doing. I mumbled some incoherent words, and he went inside to find his daughter, while I just stood there, holding the door. Shortly after, Andre came out to talk to me, but I just stared at him for a minute before passing out. The next thing I knew, I woke up in the hospital. It's been 3 months since then, and Andre stayed with me during the first few weeks after I returned home because he was afraid I would try to harm myself again. I haven't spoken a word to my ex-fiancée since then. I changed my phone number, blocked her email address, and cut off all access to her on social media. She has shown up at my door a few dozen times, talking through the door for hours on end, begging for forgiveness and telling me how sorry she is. She claims to have ended things with the AP and that his wife is now divorcing him. She also says that she got fired because the AP's wife reported them to HR. Every time Monica comes to my door, I just sit right inside and listen to her while crying. It's like I'm torturing myself, and I haven't responded to her yet. She's even told me that she can see the door move when I lean against it, so she knows I'm there. Even though I still love her like crazy, I haven't healed anything. My heart and soul are just too damaged. I'm filled with anger, hatred, and shame, and I know I can never go back to her because it would completely destroy what little self-esteem and self-respect I have left. The confrontation at her parents' place and telling the AP's wife didn't make me feel any better. If anything, I regret not just walking away. People keep telling me that at some point I'll go numb or become indifferent. And I hope that day comes soon because every day right now is like nightmare. I decided to reach out to her parents to see if they could talk to her and convince her to stop showing up at my doorstep. Honestly, I couldn't care less about her reasons or what she wants. I now understand that the person I thought she was and who she really is are two completely different people. All I want now is for her to disappear from my life so I can start moving on. Maybe I'll even get a cat or something to keep me company. But before I could talk to her parents, her father surprised me by showing up at my door with a 6-pack of my favorite beer. He asked if we could talk, and I agreed, suggesting that we could walk and talk instead of coming inside. I didn't want him to come in because my apartment was a mess, and I was afraid that she might suddenly appear at the door. Plus, I wasn't sure how awkward the conversation might get, and I didn't want to have to ask him to leave. I'm not good at confrontations. As you know, he opened 2 bottles of beer and began talking. At first, he apologized on behalf of his daughter, and then he revealed that his wife and daughter had been urging him to talk to me in order to get me to talk to his daughter. He went on to say that he had no intention of doing so, but rather supported my decisions and actions. He called his daughter spoiled and selfish, and expressed his hope that she would face the full consequences of her actions and become a better person in the future. Suddenly, he got really strange and started asking me a lot of leading questions about how I was doing. It was obvious that he was hoping to hear that I was in a lot of pain, almost as if he would enjoy seeing me suffer. His behavior unnerved me, so I lied and told him that I was completely over his daughter, that her actions didn't bother me much, and that I was happy and moving on. He looked disappointed when I told him I was over his daughter. I couldn't figure out why. Then he started talking about how much pain my ex was in. But something about his tone seemed off, like he was trying to hide his excitement about it. At that point, I knew I had to get out of there. I made up an excuse and left. But I'm moving on now, thanks to the support of strangers. It's still painful and my confidence has taken a hit, but I'm ready to leave all of this behind. In fact, I'm starting to think that maybe I dodged a bullet, not just with my ex, but with her family too. What kind of father takes pleasure in his child's suffering? After getting feedback on my previous post, I realized that I may have misjudged her father's intentions. I've always respected him, and he has been great to me. So I decided to give him a call and talk to him. It turns out that you guys were right about his leading questions. He was hoping that there was a chance for me to reconcile with his daughter because he thought I was good for her, even though he acknowledged that she didn't deserve me. This made me feel good about myself for a while, knowing that he recognized my value. As for his smile when he talked about his daughter's pain, it was actually the result of a lifelong argument with his wife about her parenting style. He had always warned her that spoiling their daughter and not giving her discipline would lead to severe negative consequences in the future. His biggest regret was letting his wife overrule him on this. He wore a big grin on his face, eagerly anticipating the moment he could prove himself right to his wife. When I asked him if there were any issues between us. He joked that maybe he should get a divorce. Apparently, after confronting his wife and daughter about me, things didn't go well. But this time, he refused to back down from the fight that had been brewing for some time. As for Andre, he's been his usual great self. He's been my rock, supporting and encouraging me through it all. Now that I'm finally out of that toxic relationship, I see how spot on he was. I stood up for myself, which is something I rarely do, and I feel amazing for it. I'd do it again in a heartbeat if the situation called for it. My ex showed up at my doorstep once again, and for the first time, I decided to have a conversation with her. She begged me to let her in so we could talk. I wasn't willing to talk to her on her terms. If we were going to have a conversation, it would be on mine. So I suggested that we meet at a local park in half an hour. I didn't want her to come inside my messy apartment, and as some of you pointed out, I didn't want to be alone with her in case she made any accusations. Oddly enough, I wasn't nervous. In fact, I felt pretty confident for once in my life. When I arrived at the park, she was already there crying. We made small talk, but it was meaningless. Then she tried to pry into what her father and I talked about, but I told her it was private and none of her business. I was getting bored, so I asked her what she wanted to talk about. As she blabbered on about how sorry she was, how much she loved me, and how wrong it all was, I couldn't help but feel a sense of detachment. It was like her words were coming from a distance, muffled by the realization that her actions had irreparably damaged our relationship. She begged for reconciliation, promised to do anything to make things right, but I knew deep down that it was all just empty words. Despite all the hurt, anger, and resentment that I had been carrying, I found myself saying that I forgave her. I didn't want to carry the weight of those negative emotions any longer. But forgiving someone doesn't always mean forgetting or reconciling. When she brought up the possibility of us getting back together, I shot it down without a second thought. It was clear to me that someone who claimed to love me could never have treated me in the way that she did. Her words fell on deaf ears as I reiterated that her actions had proven beyond a doubt that she wasn't a nice person. Nice people don't inflict such pain on the ones they claim to love. I couldn't trust her anymore. She had shown me her true colors, and they weren't pretty. With a heavy heart, I told her that I wanted to live my life with someone who appreciated and loved me, someone I could trust, someone who wouldn't betray my love and trust in the way she did. She was no longer a viable candidate for that role in my life, no matter how much she begged or pleaded. She wailed uncontrollably, her cries piercing the silence around us. I watched her with a detached sense of detachment, an unfamiliar feeling that disturbed me. I couldn't remember feeling so disconnected from anyone before. I decided to call her father to come and pick her up, as I knew I couldn't handle her in this state. I advised her to seek therapy and work on herself, as there was obviously something broken inside of her. Despite my efforts to offer some words of encouragement, she didn't seem interested in hearing them. When her dad arrived, I explained the situation to him and wished her good luck. As soon as they left, I ordered an Uber and went to the local animal shelter. There, I adopted a kitten that I named Shiny, inspired by my newfound strength to stand up for myself. Andre made a joke about my newfound spine being so shiny, and so the name stuck. I'm satisfied that I took the noble route and spoke truthfully to her without raising my voice or resorting to name-calling. I've been enjoying the company of my delightful kitten, having a blast with it, and later on, Andre is going to drop by to share a couple of drinks and play some video games. I'm heartbroken about my ex. I feel compassion for her. Although I will miss the good memories, I am also grateful that it's over. While some of the feedback I got from you folks was unpleasant and challenging to accept, I believe it was what I needed to hear in order to move on.